Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Woodburn Accountants and Advisors China webinar series on market entry into China. You have joined us for day one, part one of this series, where we will be looking at market research on a tight budget. The whole theme of this webinar series this week, which is going to be 4 days, every day we're going to have one session reflecting on something. So today we're going to be talking about market research and the value there is in conducting a variety of different types of research studies to have data at your fingertips in order to make decisions on how to move forward with your strategy in China. Part two, tomorrow we're going to be reflecting on 6 ways to do business in China without an entity, because I do know that is predominantly the first route to market in China, where people don't want to commit to the market until they're sure there is a real opportunity there and that they've already started transacting. Part 3, we're going to be looking at representative offices, something that's not really spoken about nowadays, something I don't necessarily recommend, but it is still a valued route to market. And then on the last day, we'll be talking about setting up a business in China and what would be the trigger points to push you to set something up in China. Before we begin today's session, though, I love to be able to interact with the people in my audience. So there are quite a few of you that have showed up today. I appreciate that. I know it is a Monday morning for those of you that are in Europe. And for those of you that are new to Woodburn Accountants and Advisors webinar series, please do interact with me, okay? I mean, this is the whole point of today's session, is to interact, ask your questions, make your comments. But in order for me to get an understanding of who you all are, I usually designate people into 3 different types of categories, all right? So for me, there are the newbies to China. So it's those of you that might be, quite frankly, fishing for information, right? You found an opportunity in China. China is really an interesting market for you to understand, and you are looking to gain an education on how to enter that market, what would be your route to market, and how to protect your business around that. Then you've got the startups in China. So it'd be those of you that have an entity in China, or you've been transacting for a certain period of time in China, maybe 1 to 3, 4, 5 years, and you've been so focused on your core business that certain administrative functions like research may have been left behind. So obviously you're coming on today to get an understanding of how you can, even though you have an entity, how you can maybe backtrack a little bit in terms of understanding the market in China. And then obviously there are the experienced China hands, which I've already seen a few of you have joined in. So experienced China hands are people like myself who've been in China for probably over 10, 12 years. I've been there for 16. And for those that are newbies, you're probably wondering, why are people on here that are so knowledgeable about China? Well, the reason is because there are constantly new and fresh ideas to be gained. So whenever you go to a new market, it's always good to learn from others. And the beauty about China is that everyone wants to share their stories or wants to be able to share how they've made processes simpler, cheaper, and that's why those people show up. So please interact. In your control panel, you have a chat box as well as a questions box. It'd be easier for me if you use the questions section. Input, are you a newbie? Are you a startup? Are you an experienced China hand? You just have to write newbie, startup, experienced. And that will just give me an understanding of the audience that's on here today and how I should gear the presentation. So again, interact with me. How the webinar works is I'm here to educate you. I'm not going to be selling you anything. All right, I'm here to educate you on tips of what you need to do to properly engage with the Chinese market, okay? So it is going to be 60 to 70 minutes of your valuable spend. This is a complimentary webinar, so use it to your advantage. Ask questions. I will not be leaving this webinar until all the questions or comments are answered in the question section, okay? So use this time. If you do have questions, if you want it to remain private and you don't want me to vocalize it, then also you can just write private in capital letters and I'll know that I should contact you directly after the session, okay? But use this time to ask away what you want to ask or add comments, or if something is not clear, to ask for a clarification. All right. So I love it. Some people are already on here saying experienced, but in a limited capacity from Victoria. I like that. So again, please interact with me. It just makes me understand who's on here. Okay, just a technical aspect. I don't own GoToWebinar. It is simply a platform that I use to do my webinars, a little bit like Zoom. If you run into trouble, technical difficulties, you can't hear me, or you have internet issues, which might happen because most of you maybe are at home and you have a limited bandwidth capacity, I cannot help you if I am presenting. I am sorry for that. The webinar is being recorded, so you will all get a copy of the recording, and you will also get a copy of the presentation. All right. For your information, I do tend to talk fast, so you might want to take a pen and paper and take notes. And again, if I spoke too fast and you want clarification, again, just add that into the question section, and I will put it up in the Q&A. All right. So we're covering a lot of different topics today. Everything from what is market research, what types of research you can do, when to use which research methodology, tips for companies that are looking to do research, and how not to break the bank, because everyone is currently, especially with COVID, on a very tight budget. But ultimately, I want to get everybody on here to understand that no matter what sector you're in, no matter what industry you are in, research is invaluable at your startup phase, so at the pre-investment stage, but it is also something that you should be continuously doing on your China journey, okay? That's really the main spiel I'll be going through, and I'll be emphasizing that throughout today's presentation. So a little bit about who I am. My name is Christina Kohler-Coluccia. I'm not using the webcam today because I know that a lot of people have bandwidth issues, but this allows you to see what I look like. I've got 16 years of experience in the Chinese market in regards to corporate services and corporate compliance. I've helped over 500 companies with their market entry, implementation, and growth in China. And I'm also a creator of the China Roadmap Method, which I will be reflecting on a little bit to emphasize how important it is to do research. If you're interested to learn more about the China Roadmap Method, I'm doing a webinar on August 26th in relation to that. So it's all about going on the right path or going on the right journey to make sure you eliminate as many obstacles along your path. And it's all the bullet points of things to think about when you're going into the Chinese market. So let's start today's presentation. All right, market research on a tight budget. Now, in my China Roadmap methodology, I've got 3 milestones and 9 superpowers that I want people to gain when they're starting their China journey. Okay, so the 3 milestones is: one is opportunity. It's evaluating that opportunity, understanding if there is an opportunity. The second is implementation, so implementing your strategy. And the third is growth, trying and predominantly focusing on acceleration of your growth, okay? Now, if you look at opportunity, which is the first milestone, you'll see that superpower number 2 is research. Nobody can create a strategy without having some form of data at your fingertips. And I don't necessarily mean a generalistic market research study that is, I don't know, 500 pages long, that quite frankly, if it was me, I would never read. It's focusing on what data do you need in order to make an evaluation as to whether there's an opportunity in China. And there's a whole different variety of research studies that you can do in the Chinese market, okay? So that's the main focus of today, is understanding the value of research and how important it is, not only to evaluate the opportunities, but how to continuously evaluate new opportunities that are popping up in China. So let me start with a case study, okay? So the case study that I want to touch on today, and I've used this case study previously, was when in 2014, 4, 5, 6, I don't remember exactly which year it was, I had a first time meeting with an Austrian company. They were a manufacturer of candy in Austria, and they wanted to meet with me. And my assumption was they wanted to set up an entity there. I didn't have too much of an agenda. And when they came to me, they said to me right up front, we've got a 4-foot container of product on the waters. It's going to be arriving in 4 weeks at the Shanghai port. And it stopped there. And I thought it was a bit weird that it stopped there. So I just started asking questions. I said, okay, well, what's your business model? Do you have distributors? Who is going to be the consignee of the products? And they couldn't answer me, because the reason for that trip was the fact that they were joining for the first time ever a trade show, a food trade show, and they were going to just start meeting people. And their assumption was that by meeting people, there would be so much interest in their product, orders would come so quickly, and in order to be able to deliver timely and give good customer service, the container was already on the way. Outcome of the trade show was that no orders were placed, but there was interest. And as a consequence, the goods arrived and were shipped back. Now you have to imagine, these are products that are perishable. There's a certain time limit and time frame that you can put them on the water and put them back on the water. And they basically lost a lot of money from doing that shipment, okay? In addition to all of that, they had no idea about how to actually import food and beverage items, what licenses were required, what testing had to be done, what labeling had to be done, that they had to basically start from scratch, okay? Now, I can't fault them. They had no idea, okay? They made the assumption that they were being very creative and very smart. They made an assumption that there was going to be a lot of interest in their product, and unfortunately, they were wrong. They should have done so much more research prior to setting foot on that airplane in order to be able to understand, first of all, in general, what is the food and beverage market? Perhaps testing with focus groups whether people would like their candy, right? And doing other such things. So it's just to show you, okay, you can be excited about China. Everybody is. There is so much market potential, and when you read it about it in the media, China does welcome foreign investors with open arms, okay? They want the investment. They want you to come to sell their products, okay? Regardless of the political situations that are occurring right now in the world, political is one side, let's talk about business. It is business as usual in China, okay? And the government does want foreign investment to come in. The issue is making sure you know exactly what you're getting yourself into, you understand the regulations around your sector, around your industry, and you do the research to understand what knowledge you have to have in that market. My belief is knowledge is power, okay? And that is really true for the Chinese market. I also believe you cannot formulate a strategy in China without having data at your fingertips, all right? So what is research? Well, research is obviously a method of gathering and analyzing information about the market you want to go into, okay? Now, the question is, what information do you need in order to make sure that your idea is feasible? So are you going to find out about the features of the market, the spending habits, who your target customers are, what competitors do you have in the market? What are their products and services? What is the pricing like? Is there already awareness of your brand in the market? Okay, these are the things that you want to find out. Now, there's several ways of doing research. And obviously, the first and foremost is desktop research, which you can do directly from your computer. All right, but it's understanding also about tapping into an ecosystem that you need to develop in the Chinese market. By that, I mean contacts that you can reach out to also get data free of charge. All right. And there's a lot of ways that you can get that. Then there are things that you can do like secondary research or surveys or conducting focus groups or doing interviews, observations, experiments, field trials. Now, all of these you might have to outsource to a provider in China. But prior to that, there's a lot of desk research you can do, okay? If you want to find out about the rules and regulations of importing food and beverage products, just have to type that into Google, okay? The only thing that I want to give you as a tip is when you are doing your desk research, you will find that there are millions of sites available. Regulations change very quickly. Information is updated very quickly. So when you are doing your desktop research, do not read anything that is dated past 1 year, okay? Within a 12-month time frame, it should be good enough to get the most recent and up-to-date information. So if we are in July now, don't look at anything from June and prior, June 2019 and prior. It doesn't make sense. Things have already been updated and changed. So look at articles, garner information from that period time frame. If you read something that's prior to that date, make an assumption that it might be outdated. Okay, you want to make sure that whatever you're doing is the most recent and up-to-date information. Now, what types of research could you do? All right, now here is, for me, the most vital ones, and I'll tell you what I do, okay? And I'm in the service sector. So the majority here is in relation to products, but I'll tell you what I do as well in terms of my own research. So in terms of market segmentation, okay, this is really critical. What market segmentation means is that you are generally asking survey questions aimed at capturing needs, values, attitudes, behaviors, demographics, okay? China is a huge market. You have to segment it. You cannot make the assumption that you can go into China and it will be the whole of China, okay? You've got to be able to segment it. The next one is doing product testing, okay? It's basically getting a detailed understanding of how your product meets or does not meet your customer's need. It is crucial for marketing. It is crucial for product development. And to be honest with you, this is one category of research where people make the assumption they don't have to do it because their product is perfect and it's ready to go to market. You may want to have your prototypes or your products tested through focus groups prior to entering into the market. You might want to get that feedback so you can adapt the market, the product or the service to the market, okay? This is going to save you a lot of capital, a lot of time, a lot of effort, and disappointment if it doesn't work out and you're wondering why. Another thing that you might want to test out is advertising, okay? If you are going in the B2C market, you want to make sure that your advertising campaigns are going in the right direction, okay? Again, this will save you valuable time and resources. Take potential campaigns to your audience and gauge their response, okay? Is it going to be impactful or not? Then you have to do also a satisfaction and loyalty analysis. Are your customers happy with you? Okay, loyalty, satisfied customers does not mean necessarily that they are loyal to you. They may switch because of price. They may switch because of location. All right, so you've got, they may switch because of a slight adaptation to a product that your competitor did. All right, so doing this form of analysis is extremely helpful. The next one is brand awareness and reach. And I say this a lot for people that are in this consumer products market and they're gearing towards the e-commerce market. Do people know your brand? Don't make the assumption that they do. You might want to do some testing first to see whether they know you, they know your product, and what is the reach of that. Is it just people that are based in the tier 1 cities, or is it also in the tier 2, tier 3 cities? Okay. You want to be able to analyze your customers' profiles through this, brand loyalty, brand trust, brand image, brand identity. Okay. So understand that aspect. Doing pricing research. Now, I always use this as an example with my husband. So my husband is in the food and beverage sector. And every time we go into a supermarket, it's at least 1 hour longer that we have to be in there than necessary. Why? Because he goes into a sector of the supermarket, one aisle in particular, and just goes up and down for an hour, evaluating the positioning of the products, price, looking at the competitors. And this is his own field research in his own time, right? So just an example, if you are in the food and beverage sector, go to supermarkets yourself. Go to the Carrefours, go to the Codis, these are the types of 7-Elevens. Go to the Chinese supermarkets, get a feeling of yourself. Do that field trip yourself to understand pricing, positioning, and how the supermarkets lay their products out. Very different in China than elsewhere. Look at flavors, which is also, again, very different than in the Western world. But it does help you to gauge pricing and helps you to do pricing comparisons. So when I say desktop research, you obviously, when the borders open again, can do a lot of that field research yourself on a business trip. Okay, and do it obviously in different cities, not just in Shanghai. Shanghai, quite frankly, is not real China. Go into the tier 2 cities, go into the tier 2 cities and see how that's all working out. Do competitor benchmarking. So for example, for me, I do the last 3 points regularly. Not every year, not every 6 months, but I do it regularly. I do a competitor benchmarking. I look at maybe between 5 to 10 of my competitors at different ranges, and I look at what they're doing, predominantly what they're doing differently from me, and is that better or not? I also do a price benchmarking study. How are their prices compared to mine based on my services? I also do a little bit of brand awareness. So I do go on to certain Chinese search engines, just type in our company name, although that's not 100% vital for me, but it's just important to know in the market, because that's not my target market necessarily, who knows about me, who knows about Woodburn, who knows about Christina, who knows about my team. So the last 3 I do regularly. Satisfaction and loyalty analysis, I do this directly with my customers on an annual basis. And I get feedback. And I'm very open, saying, what do you like and what do you not like about us? How can we improve? And it's always better to focus on the negatives so that you can actually move in the right direction in terms of your own firm and how you want to improve things. Now, in that process, what I also do is I evaluate our service listing, because it's important to know what the customers need and what they want. Okay, if you don't have this communication, you won't know how to improve. You won't know how to maybe also grow your business and accelerate your business. Maybe you were focusing on services that were not applicable to the market, and you've got to focus on something else. All of this just basically means by doing this type of research, you can formulate an updated strategy. You can focus on growth, and more importantly, you can focus on the acceleration of growth, meaning increased revenue and growing your business in the market. This is why I say research is a must in the pre-investment stage, because without data, how can you really know how to go in the market? But this form of research should also be continuous. Again, not something you have to do every 6 months, not something you have to do every year, but every 18 to 24 months to refresh yourself with new data, it is important. Okay, now a lot of it, again, you can do by communication with people, utilizing social media, talking to customers, talking to chambers of commerce, talking to associations, and understanding what's available. Now, there is different forms of research methodology, okay? Now, you've got to understand what type of methodology you want to use. Now, I just want to emphasize here, we don't do market research studies internally, okay? But I think it is something that is so valuable for companies and clients to do, which is why I've brought up this topic, okay? I can't sell you anything from this because we don't offer this service at all. But what I see as always a dilemma is that people say, yeah, we need a market research study, but there's no focus to that study, okay? So you've got to understand, do you want to have a study that provides you with an understanding of the awareness of your brand? Do you want to have a study that is understanding who you should be targeting? Is it a study about how to acquire clients? Is it going to be a study about how to retain clients? You've got to have a focus, okay, when you're doing your studies. Now, if you are brand new to the market and you're a newbie, you might want to focus on awareness and targeting, and acquisition will come next. If you're already in the market, you might want to focus solely on acquisition and retention. If you're already in the market and you've brought out a new product, you might want to focus on targeting. Who wants that product? Who is it going to be aimed for? Okay. Now, this chart, it's called the relevant wheel. Okay. And it's valuable to you to understand what is appropriate for you at that point in time and where you should be placing your focus. Please don't create or ask a company to create a market research study that is so generalistic, that is 500 pages long, and all you're going to be doing is reading the foreword or the executive summary. Really no point. If you create a study that is purely focused on market segmentation, and you ask the provider to then give you, I don't know, a PowerPoint presentation where it's so easy to explain exactly the findings, so much easier. I'm not a person who's going to read a 500-page report, okay? I just want facts, and I want to have information to tell me in which direction to go. So use this relevant wheel to guide you on what is critical for you at this point in time for research. And it might change in 6 months. It might change in 12 months where you have to have a different type of focus. Now, here we need to make a distinction between data collection methods and market research types based on an analytical approach, which is often confused. Data collection methods differ based on whether we want to conduct qualitative or quantitative research, okay? So qualitative research is exploratory in nature. Okay? It uses data collection methods such as focus groups, dyads, in-depth interviews, uninterrupted observations, etc. Quantitative is basically looking to quantify a problem, and it's collecting data through surveys, audits, click streams, etc. But it's giving you actual analytical quantitative numbers data, okay? Now, tips for companies that are looking to conduct research in China. Quite frankly, a simple desk-based research can tell you a lot about the fundamental aspect of the market you're about to enter as a company or as a startup. And you will want to know the total size of the market, any historical trends, the traditional route to market, and how market share is distributed between competitors. And getting this kind of feel for your market will help you avoid pitfalls. It will help you to better navigate the landscape in which your customers and competitors are operating in. Now, how can you do this simple desk-based research? Well, first of all, you can use Google search, all right? Second of all, try to use the Chinese search engines because you might find more valuable information regarding your Chinese competitors through those search engines. And then utilize associations and chambers of commerce. Now, in a lot of associations, so first of all, if you are based in the UK and you don't know this, you have a lot of avenues for research. You can use the China-Britain Business Council, or you can also use the Department of International Trade, okay, where you can actually have research and data at your fingertips. for either free of charge or at a small fee. If you are in Germany, there are 3 different China-related associations, as well as the Ausländische Handelskammer, okay, which is a type of internal chamber of commerce within the country. These chambers of commerce have then chambers of commerces in China, where you can also get data and information at your fingertips. If you are in the US, you have the US-China Business Council that's based out of Washington, DC, but you also have the American Chambers of Commerce that are located in China. Now, many of these, okay, and in addition to that, I just want to highlight, for those of you that are based in the European Union, you also have the EU SME Center. You type in EU SME Center, China, you will come up on their website and you will find a lot of research studies that are absolutely free of charge, and all they are asking for is data for you to input to be able to download those research studies. You will find things specifically on the meat market, specifically on consumer trends, specifically on food and beverage, manufacturing. It's free of charge. And if it's not, you're not paying more than 50 euros for a complete market research report. Okay? Again, these research studies are not my type of studies because they are about 50 pages long and they go in depth and you got to read it. But it's at your fingertips. Okay, so the whole point of me here today is to give you this advice, all right? Is to give you is to give you these tips where you don't have to spend money, and if you do, it is at a minimal cost to get it. One thing I just want to highlight about desktop research is that a lot of companies in Europe and in the US, they have the trend, and Australia, by the way, they have the trend to hire Chinese graduate students to work as interns or part-time in their organizations to help do research. Now, if you're hiring a graduate student who's already got a university degree and has had a couple of years of work experience, that's probably going to be more helpful because they'll understand what you want. If you are hiring a university student who's had no practical experience, you are really going to have to guide that individual to know what to research. Don't have the expectation that just because they have a Chinese face and they speak Chinese, they'll know what to do. They've never had work experience. You can't have that expectation. And I know too many companies that have hired individuals like this on a part-time basis to do, for example, brand awareness studies through various social media sites. Okay, they might know how to use those sites, but they might not necessarily know how to analyze the data that they're getting. So, you know, ideally, I don't recommend that route, and especially now where people are kind of blocked off in their homes and a lot of international students are required to go back home, that might not be an avenue for you anymore. So you might want to use an internal staff who knows your company, knows your products, or knows your services to do that research for you. Okay, it will be much, much faster. You've got to be able to understand your target customers. It's important to get perspectives from them, particularly in China, where there is a cultural influence that may impact their decisions and their tastes, okay? Questionnaires, surveys are a very useful way to assess how your potential customers may interact with with your products, with your brands, how they may purchase them, etc. Now, nobody's done this, but this is what I would do, okay? I have a database that's already built up, so I use my database, and every so often, I do send a questionnaire and survey to my database to ask them to give me feedback. They might not be clients of mine, but it's to get feedback on the content that I produce. It's to get feedback on the webinars that I produce and the topics that I have. It's usually a questionnaire or survey with no more than 3 to 4 questions and would take less than 1 minute to complete. But it gives me so much insight on how to change my content, to understand what my audience wants to know about. Okay, now the difference here is I have an audience, I have a database of people. Where can you find that database? First of all, if you have WeChat and you're starting to build up your ecosystem on WeChat, utilize that. Second of all, if you are interested in participating with the associations and with the chambers of commerce, and you become a member. Now, if you think about it, and you're a small, medium-sized company, the membership fees at these places are not expensive, okay? If I give you an example, with the China-Britain Business Council, you're probably paying, if you're an SME, somewhere between 1,000 and 2,000 pounds for an annual subscription. It is a matter of how you can take as much as possible out of that membership. And one of them is saying, could I send out a questionnaire or survey to your audience to get feedback? Or going to, for example, the American Chamber of Commerce in Shanghai, or the Canadian Chamber of Commerce in Shanghai. It depends on who your audience is and which jurisdiction you're from. And say, you know, I'm a member, I really want to get some feedback. Could I post on your website somewhere a survey or an online questionnaire that your audience could help maybe fill in so I can get some feedback? This is the purpose of the chambers. The purpose of the chambers is to help their members grow in China. I haven't seen too many companies do this, but I don't see any harm in asking these things. Okay, they are there to help you. Okay, and the way to get feedback is to obviously send these surveys and questionnaires and get answers. If you just get one, or if you just get 5, it's enough for you to have some sort of feedback and evaluation. Okay, to understand also the interests of the people. You want to be able to also understand how your product and your service will be used. Okay, now this is the only place you might have to outsource to a provider in China, where I would recommend doing face-to-face interviews or focus groups to understand how Chinese customers would use your product, whether they like your product, what are their attitudes to it, can they provide information on the negatives associated. This is a complete hands-on experience, which will provide you immediate feedback, okay? Now, this is for the pre-investment stage. In order for, if you're already existing in China, what is the best way to find out how your product or service is doing? Is by going to visit your customers and understanding, do they like it? Do they see problems? Most people hate to hear negative things. I always feel now in this negative climate around COVID, it's even more so. But this is where you have the opportunity to improve and beat your competitors out. Talk to your customers. How can you improve? Get their attitudes, okay? And it's you're there then to understand, you know, can you fulfill their demands? Can you fulfill their needs? All right. Now, if you're not in China right now, and obviously the borders are shut, then you've got to make sure that you have outsource this to a provider or use your team locally in China to help you with that. Find out what your customers are looking for. Now, this is absolutely something that you can do with desktop research. Obviously, here you probably will need a Chinese-speaking individual to help you with this. You can do keyword searches related to your market, related to your service, to help understand what Chinese customers want. Okay, there are tools like Google Analytics. You've got Bing Analytics, WeChat Analytics. You've got free analytical tools that are available to you to understand what are the keyword searches and to help you also evaluate what people are saying. You know, if you would search now on Bing for your company name, how many sites would pop up? What would be said about you? That you can do on your desk. As long as you speak Chinese and you can read Chinese, you can do that. Alternatively, you can go, for example, to a digital marketing agency, and this might be part of their initial research to understand how to build up a digital strategy for you. And you might have to pay for it. Don't ask me how much those things cost. I've never asked. I'm not a digital marketing agency. But what does it hurt to ask 3, 4, 5 different marketing digital agencies whether they offer this type of service and how much it costs? You might be surprised at how cheap it will be. Don't always make the assumption that when you're looking for a type of service that will give you data, it's going to be exorbitant and expensive. It might not always be, okay? And what does it hurt to ask? Doesn't hurt at all. If you don't like the answer and you don't like the fee being offered, you don't use them. But you might get information and tidbits from their proposals of what you could do in your own, with your own team and doing your own desktop research. You can find out who will buy your product or service and why, and this is vital. If you know who your primary Chinese customer is, you can gather absolutely valuable information about their attitudes and their purchasing habits. For instance, you might want to know what factors influence their decision to buy, what circumstances would make them more likely to buy, or what would make them choose your product over another. Having as much information at your fingertips before releasing your product or your service will give you more power to target them effectively. And this is again why I say, if you are providing a product, you might want to do face-to-face interviews and focus groups, okay, to really understand how it all works out. You need to be able to anticipate demand. Now, this is particularly for those of you that are in the pre-investment stage, and maybe you've never transacted with China. You need to be able to convince your board of directors that China has a tremendous opportunity. Now, if I were an investor, or even for those of you that are looking for investors, the one thing that investors want to see are the numbers. Okay, so at some point, you're going to have to anticipate demand. You're going to have to anticipate the volume of business that's going to be going through in China. So you have to know how many people, you've got to estimate basically, how many people are going to buy your product? What are going to be the demand levels? And what would be the price point at which people would be willing to buy your product? Okay, now this can be through competitor benchmarking. It can be through a pricing analysis. Many different ways to do this. Now, obviously, you are not on the ground in China. So to do a field study trip on what would, and looking at your competitors, it might be very difficult to do these types of price points and understand. But there are companies out there that do offer that. So you need to be aware of it. You need to be able to make a better product. So there's a lot of startup programs and organizations in China that help people develop their networks, give advice on pitching to investors and whatnot. And I think the one thing that I've noticed is that when you're an entrepreneur or when you have developed an idea for going into the Chinese market, you are 100% convinced that it's perfect, okay? I just want to say here, what does it hurt to do a test run? It doesn't hurt anybody, okay? And the only thing that it will benefit you from doing a test run is saving cost, okay? You want to be able to gauge very quickly whether there are potential problems with your product. You want to be able to shape current features. You want to fine-tune your product before it is being released on the market, okay? And if you are already in the market and you're finding that your numbers are not good, maybe it's time to do this. Maybe it's time to backtrack a little bit and focus with these focus groups or these face-to-face interviews, what people are saying about your product. And again, there are organizations in China that offer this type of service. You can establish a brand positioning and messaging, okay? Now, one of the things that people really under-evaluate in China is the amount of marketing, especially as a foreign brand, that you have to do. If people don't know you, then you're going to have to spend a lot of money on marketing, okay? So to start off with, do a brand awareness study, understand your positioning, understand exactly what the status is today, okay? And at that point, you've got to build a messaging campaign in order to build up your brand, basically. Now, for those of you that are in the B2C market, it's all about, the benefits of your products and where can people find them and what are their advantages, etc. For those of you that are in the B2B market and you are in a sector that is maybe highly technological, if it's a brand new product that's not really seen anywhere. You have to educate people on it, okay? Not just in your own market, but also in China. So the whole point of brand building is also a matter of educating people on the product that you're trying to sell or the service that you're trying to sell, whether that's B2B or B2C. So don't underestimate that aspect as well, okay? Understand where you stand today, what is the status, what do people know, and then build a messaging campaign around that. One thing I just want to highlight here. So again, in order to do digital marketing, people have a couple of options. One, they can outsource to marketing agencies that build campaigns for them. And some of the feedback that I've received from clients of mine has been, after a certain one, it's been amazing because we've been able to outsource everything and we're getting traction and feedback. Others have simply said it's been very difficult because they're not experts in our product. So a lot of the times we have to write the campaigns ourselves and all they do is the translation. So in that regard, many people have actually hired individuals internally who are digital experts, but who also know their product and have a background in that, who can build up great messaging and campaigns around that. So you'll always get positive and negatives when you outsource. So you have to evaluate whether it makes more sense to do it in-house or to outsource that. You can uncover market potentials. So again, market research doesn't need to be costly. As a startup, as an entrepreneur, as an SME, there are plenty of ways to get valuable and credible market insights without hurting your budget. Before you start, take some time to think about what you want from your audience. Are there any key decisions you're facing as a business? What questions will help you to make those key decisions? What answers are going to be most valuable for you? Make sure every question has a clear purpose. If you are outsourced, so first of all, if you're doing this as a desktop research, you need to have a guideline yourself of what data you need to convince your investors to move forward with China. If you're going to be outsourcing it, you have to give very clear directives to the outsourced parties on what research they should be doing. So make a list of questions you want answered, okay? Now, with COVID-19, personally, I would start with someone on the ground and take the opportunity to ask customers face-to-face for their feedback, okay? Or utilize social media platforms to build up a network of peers, gather opinions both about the market and your product, okay? Using online tools such as Zoho Survey or SurveyMonkey. These are quick, easy to create online surveys and questionnaires that, again, you can distribute. Now, what you might find from all of this is that there are new opportunities that are available to you. A lot of companies have had to pivot their business models during COVID-19, okay? You can't pivot your business opportunities unless you know there's a new market potential and you're doing this type of work, all right? So do understand that. Now, I just want to give a case study here. And this case study will come up in next month's webinar series where we'll be looking at building your strategy for China. I have a guest speaker who's coming on from Kiva Global called Ellie Adams. She's a market research analyst, okay? And she does market research studies, particularly in food and beverage, pharmaceutical, medical device, etc. She gives a case study, or she will be giving a case study, looking at the vitamin sector. And it's a very detailed case study, which I found fascinating because originally the client had taken their analysis of their own home market and replicated it for China. And when she came in to do her analysis, it was a completely different target market. So to give you one example, they focus on men. In China, they should be focusing on women. Again, completely different messaging then at that point, completely different target market, okay? When they found out the reasons why people wanted these vitamins, their assumptions were completely wrong compared to what was actually happening in China, okay? So you either need to get help or you need to have someone in-house who can find out these details for you, all right? To find out and analyze the information so that you're not wasting time, okay? I know too many companies that go into China and have I don't know, they wait 3 to 5 years, so that whole startup phase, and they have wrong data at their fingertips. Okay. Now, there was a question in the registration form, which I found very interesting, from one of the registrants, which said, how can we rely on the data we are receiving? Now, that's an excellent question, because it is very difficult to get reliable data in China, which is why I am of the opinion you should be utilizing not just general statistical data that you will get from statistical agencies in China. That I probably wouldn't rely so much on, okay? I would focus on hands-on research, interviews, focus groups. You do focus groups. If you aren't able to travel to China, which probably you're not, ask your provider to do videos so you can look at the physical reactions on those people's faces, okay? You want to have surveys, you want to have questionnaires, and you want to distribute them through various channels to get feedback, whether that means maybe associations, chambers of commerce, your WeChat connections. Just send it out and get data back, okay? Going on the ground, or having someone go on the ground to go into a supermarket, if you're in the food and beverage sector, and actually analyze those aisles that are critical, taking photos of those aisles for you, getting the price points of your competitors. That's field research. That's not wrong data, okay? You know, calling your, or having people call your competitors, again, to get proposals from them. Look at how your competitors are preparing proposals. Again, this is actual data at your fingertips. This is useful data. If you're doing brand awareness, getting actual an understanding of you know, snapshots of what people are saying about you. That's real data. Now, obviously, this is, you know, people have to, you're hoping that people are telling the truth when they post things on social media and whatnot. But generally, if someone is taking the time to fill out a survey or a questionnaire, they're not really going to lie. Okay, but utilize those resources to get appropriate data. And I agree, you know, getting statistical data from the Chinese government, that I wouldn't rely on. But getting concrete field research study, that there's nothing better than that in any market that you go into. So how can I do research without breaking the bank? Well, the first step is understanding what research you need. Okay, what questions do you want answered? Take a piece of paper, write all the questions that you have. So for me now, 16 years into the market, I don't have to research who my competitors are. I know who my competitors are, okay? I know everybody who charges less than me, lower quality, better quality. I know everything. I know exactly my market. What I want to do as a continuous research is a price benchmarking, because on an annual basis with inflation, everyone changes their pricing. I'm just always curious to know by how much do they do that. Okay, so I do a price analysis on my competitors on an annual basis to understand what they're doing. I also really enjoy looking at how they create their proposals and how they show the information, because it is complex in China to show all the services and the related fees, and people don't even understand a lot of things that have to happen in China. So I'm always curious, and maybe I learn something from that, okay? But I know what my questions are. And sometimes I throw in a question there because I haven't done it in a long time, okay? So I'll throw in something like every 5 years or so, I'll throw in who are the new players in the market, because there's always new people that show up. Or I'll do an analysis on which firms have merged together and gotten bigger, and where they have maybe a new clientele, and things like that. So, you know, that's the research that I do, and I know what my questions are. Start with some desk research. How much can you discover online by yourself? Okay, that's free of charge. But if you don't know what questions need to be answered, your desk research is going to be so chaotic, you're going to go from one topic to another without having a proper direction. Next step is either have someone on the ground in China or be in China to take the opportunity to ask and get face-to-face feedback. Use social media platforms, Use the Chambers of Commerce. The EU SME Center, as I said, offers free research studies. Attend networking or social events. So what I found fascinating, if you're from the China-Britain Business Council has now done two webinars, panel discussions related to two very different sectors. Updates on, one of them was the food and beverage, and the other one I think is coming up this week or next week about something in technology, I forget what. Use that avenue. And I said the membership in those places is pretty much irrelevant when you think that you can do it on your own, and you can garner so many things from them. Talk to people, okay? Visit sites as to where your product might be sold. Do on the ground footwork yourself or have somebody do that for you. Take photos, give you that analysis. Next step would also be utilizing free online tools, survey applications that you can utilize. And then finally, if you really need to conduct formal interviews, focus groups, online brand perceptions, where you might want to have a marketing agency do that, or doing price research studies or competitor benchmarking studies, you may want to outsource those things. And again, first avenue, go to certain associations, chambers of commerce, departments of trade and commerce. They might offer these things to you. If you are from the EU, go to the EU SME Center, okay? That would be the first place to go to. At that point, if you want to have something much more detailed, then go to market research companies that will go into much more detail, but then be prepared to pay a slightly higher cost. General pricing is usually between, as a starting rate, will be at about 3,000, the equivalent of 3,000 USD, okay? But again, if you don't know what you're looking for, no point talking to these providers. You've got to know exactly what you're looking for so they can go exactly into the data that you want. Okay, you've got to be very clear on that in your mind. So when it comes to research, can you afford not to do it? Okay, going into the Chinese market is very complex. And I have seen a lot of companies get burned because they didn't do their research. They didn't have data at their fingertips. They didn't do a thorough examination of the opportunities that were in the market. And after a certain period of time, they exited the market because they had basically drained the investment capital. They had put in too many resources, and nothing was coming into fruition. It does not have to be like that for you. Spend the time initially to understand whether the Chinese market makes sense. I had a client who utilized our PEO service, which is our professional employment organization service, where we hired an individual on their behalf to do on-the-ground research for them. It was very directed, very clear what his objectives were. That project lasted 2 years, at which point the company said, we would like to let him go. We will use him on a freelance basis, predominantly because the market is not big enough for us and we don't have the resources to focus on it anymore. We will come back in 5 years' time. So it could very well be that the research you do is not positive right now. Maybe it's too early for you to go. Or maybe the research will show that you need a tremendous amount of capital investment, time, resource in order to go in, and you don't have that yet, okay? So the whole point of doing the research is really to know whether it makes sense for you to go into the market or not. One thing I do want to scare you with, and I will also highlight that on the 4th day on Thursday, is that if you set up an entity in China, it takes 2 years to liquidate that entity. So don't go into the market thinking sexy to have an office. We should have an office. Don't go into the market thinking we need an office to grow our business. Not necessarily. Don't set up an office if you don't need to have an office. Then realize you don't need that office and it takes 2 years to liquidate it. Okay? You want to be able to develop and maintain your advantage in China. You want to understand the trends. Now, not only do rules, laws, and regulations change quickly, but trends change quickly, okay? COVID-19 put people into a position where they went digital. And a lot of stores, a lot of retail companies are closing down stores because it doesn't make sense for them anymore. You've got to listen to your customers and communicate with them, okay? The more you know about your customers, the more equipped you are to create targeted marketing, to anticipate spending, changes in spending behavior, to deliver a better product or service. So it's important to have that level of communication. And I hope this alone has convinced you how important it is to do research and why on our China roadmap method, it is the second superpower that you've got to obtain. Because without it, you can't develop a strategy and you can't have a continuous strategy for the market. So the next step, obviously, once you have the research, is you've got to develop a strategy, okay? And you've got to develop a strategy that fits you. So, you know, here are the 3 questions. What type of channel strategy are you going to have? What type of marketing strategy are you going to have? And are you going to have a distributor strategy? And tomorrow, with the 6 ways of doing business in China without an entity, we'll be talking about the channel strategy and distributor strategy together, okay? And what options you have. But without data at your fingertips, you can't create a strategy. And this is what next month's webinar series is also going to highlight when we talk about build your strategy for China. All right, so I hope that presentation was useful to you. If you guys are interested, you are more than welcome to book a brainstorming session with me. If you just want to kind of brainstorm a little what you've already done, maybe in terms of research, what's worked, what's not worked, in which direction you might want to go to. Look, these sessions are free of charge. You're more than welcome to set up a meeting with me. I'm going to put these links in right now into the chat box. So you can just click on these links if you want to set up an appointment with me. Again, free of charge, complimentary, just a brainstorming session. I'm going to give you guys my email address as well if you want to connect and send me something, or if you want to connect with me on WeChat, you can do that as well. I'm going to give you my ID and you can go ahead and connect with me too. So just remember, I mean, these brainstorming sessions are free of charge. It's just a matter of talking, and sometimes you want to bounce ideas off of somebody. So I'm more than happy to have you bounce ideas with me. So let's get going on questions that may have popped in. So there's one question that's popped in from Robert. What are some ways to do in China those tests? Who knows us? Who knows our competitors? Who knows me personally? So what are some of the ways to do this? The whole brand awareness aspect, the first focus I would do is to do it digitally. So, you know, for example, I Google my name sometimes, and I'm interested to see what pops up, where my name is placed, and it gives me an understanding of maybe how many, how do you call that? How many results pop up when I do the Google search. I also do it on Bing, and I also check with my name what pops up. Then I do searches also with Woodburn, and I do it on Google, I do it on Bing, I do it on LinkedIn to know who's shared it. In order to know your competitors or who knows your competitors, that's a bit tricky. First of all, you've got to know who your competitors are in the market. You need to have a list of names. I would then investigate those competitors. What are their business models? What are their backgrounds? What are their price points? What products and services are they offering? How big are they in the market? And who knows them? Well, type your competitor's name also in Google, also in Bing, also on LinkedIn, and then utilize also those social media platforms like Weibo, WeChat, and see what pops up there. That's just simple desk research. You can go into so much more detail if you utilize an agency to help you with that. So another question that's popped in is, what are some of the top market research companies which are being used by foreign companies? There are hundreds of market research companies out there. What people use predominantly as a first point of solution are the associations and the chambers of commerce, because they are also slightly cheaper than big market research companies. Now, you do have companies like McKinsey that produce reports free of charge. You also have the EU SME Center, which produces reports free of charge. And then in terms of just general China-related market research companies, again, I don't want to name everybody I know, but if you want to have a referral, it's good to do it based on your industry and sector. It's important to know what market research companies are focusing on, because if you're working with a market research company that's focused on medical devices and you're in the food and beverage, that really doesn't make sense. Okay, so understand that aspect. There's an interesting question that's come in about understanding more about importing clinical trial material into China. So one of the important aspects in relation to every sector and industry is understanding what are the requirements to bring in that product or bring in that service. So for example, if you're in the food and beverage sector, you've got to understand the labeling procedures, and you've got to understand the additional licenses that the consignee of those products has to have. Okay, and you've got to make sure they have them. If you are in the electrical field, you will need to have a 3C certification to import your products. If you are in the medical device sector, there are some medical devices that do not need any form of certification and others which do. If you are in cosmetics, you will need certain certifications to import your products. So it really comes down to knowing what is required for your industry and sector. And that should be one of the first questions you ask is, can I bring my product into China? Right? You've got to understand that. So I hope I answered that point. You've really got to know. So, I mean, if you're importing clinical trial material, you do need licenses. It depends what type of material it is. But you will need additional, the consignee who brings in the product will need licenses to be able to pass it through customs. Then there's another question: which government ministries or departments are most important or most likely to present hurdles when entering China? It depends on how you want to, it depends on how you want to enter China. So I have clients who simply want to transact directly from their head office in China. In that regard, the only bureau that may affect them is the Customs Bureau when importing. So you've got to make sure that your product has all the necessary certifications, licenses, labelings that are required to bring it in. But generally, whoever you are selling that product to in China should be responsible for those steps and should be educating you on that. If you have your own entity in China, for me, the two biggest bureaus, and again, they don't present hurdles, it's just the two bureaus that any company works with the most would be the Tax Bureau and the Labor Bureau, because your company will be operational. So that depends on what you're actually looking to do. So then there's a very specific question on how would budget restrict market research be done effectively in the education sector. So if you are in the education sector, so let's say you are a school or a university or an online learning platform, probably what you want to do is understand the brand awareness. So if you are a university in Germany, in England, in the US, you might want to find out whether people know of you. And if they know of you, what is being said about you? Is it good? Is it bad? And you might want to have a campaign around educating people on the benefits of being educated on your platform or at your university, etc. So brand awareness and brand positioning is probably the most important. Other forms of research that I would do is check what your competitors are doing. There are a lot of universities as well as online platforms, educational platforms that are already in China. So you already have a pool of competitors to see what their business models are, how big they are, how are they functioning, to understand whether you want to follow that business model or not. Okay. So those are probably the two things that I would do initially to understand. And obviously now with COVID and the border control restrictions and students being sent back to China, I mean, the education sector doesn't really look great at the moment for those people that are, those universities or platforms that are in the UK, US, Australia, etc. So just be aware of that. All right, those are all the questions that have come in. If there are any more, I will still stay on. So if you keep typing, I'll take a look at those. Again, I just want to highlight, if you want to have a meeting with me, the link, I've put it into this the chat section, so you can just click on it. And if you want to set up a meeting, you're more than welcome to. There are 3 more webinars in this series. So tomorrow we're talking about 6 ways to do business in China without an entity. Thursday about rep offices in China, and on Thursday we'll be looking at setting up a business in China, and predominantly what are the trigger points for you to move in that direction. I do want to thank everybody for joining me today. It's been wonderful to have you on here. Again, if you still want to chat a little bit or if you've got questions, I will stay on for another few minutes. So please do go ahead and message. But in the meantime, I'll stop the recording and hopefully I'll see you again this week. Take care and goodbye.